Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The moment Sienna Bacall said those words, her entire life fell apart. Now that everyone in Genoa City knew the truth about Mitch, known as Match, Sienna realized there was no turning back. Her admission to Nick Newman was a death sentence, not just a shocking revelation. She had been balancing allegiance and survival between the deadly man she had previously defended and the conscience that plagued her every waking moment for weeks. Sienna was now looking directly into the abyss after disclosing Match's secret. Nick's horrified gaze etched into her memories, making her heart accelerate. As the gravity of her decision dawned on them, the club lights faded around them. Matt Clark, Match's true identity, was no longer concealed. Additionally, the man she deceived had always assured her that anyone who revealed him would not live long enough to repent it. Sienna had prayed that she would be able to outrun this day, even though she knew it would come. She saw the darkness of a guy who thrived on dishonesty, manipulation and retaliation every time she met Match's eyes. After years of concealment, he had rebuilt himself, using his charm and cunning to subjugate the elite of Genoa City. His greatest challenge had always been Nick, the one person who could ruin everything he had created. Before her remorse overcame her, Sienna believed she could keep the two of them apart. It was too much to see Victoria piece together hints, watch Sharon doubt her sanity and watch Nick slide. So she was honest. She disclosed that Mitch Bacall was more than simply an enigmatic businessman with a dark past. He was Matt Clark, the same man everyone thought was dead, and who had once caused turmoil for Nick's family. When Sienna confessed, Nick's expression was a mixture of shock and fury. It was like a hit to the belly to hear Sienna, someone he had trusted and even admired, confirm what he had thought. "Are you aware of what you've done?" Nick demanded, his voice quivering with dread and rage. "I had to, Nick," Sienna said, her lips trembling. She knew in her heart that she had also signed her own death warrant, but you deserved to know. These kinds of secrets didn't remain hidden for long, and Match had eyes everywhere. Even from a great distance she could practically feel his gaze. Every whisper felt dangerous, and every shadow in the room appeared to be moving. Sienna's body was trembling violently by the time Nick stormed out, desperate to face Match. Her gut told her to flee. Before Match realized she had spoken, she had to leave town and vanish. However, it was too late. She heard footsteps behind her that same evening as she closed up the Bacall Club. Take your time. Heavy. Thoughtful. When she turned around, nobody was there. She reached for her phone, gasping for air. Then a familiar, chilly, silky voice reverberated through the void. "Sienna, you simply couldn't stop talking, could you?" She shuddered at the sound of his voice. She knew it was him without having to turn around. For her, the match had arrived. Sienna's thoughts were racing. The rear exit was the only way out, but Match stood in her way. His face was too serene. He gazed at her as a predator would gaze at its victim prior to the final blow. He whispered, "I warned you." Sienna's eyes welled with sorrow as she said, "I told you what would happen if you ever betrayed me. Mitch, you can't continue living this way. You're ruining everyone and everything." Nick was entitled to know. Although her voice broke, her tone remained defiant. Match grinned and moved in closer. Nick was deserving of pain. "You deserve to remain silent too." He grabbed her arm and pushed her up against the bar before she could reply. As she struggled to break away, the glass broke. "Don't do this, Mitch, please," she begged. Something flickered in his eyes for a moment, perhaps regret, but it vanished as fast as it had appeared. "You made your decision," he stated icily. Then, equally abruptly, he released her. "You have 24 hours to vanish. I won't give you another warning if I see your face in Genoa City again," he said in a poisonous tone. Then he disappeared into the night, leaving Sienna shattered and shaking. Sienna, however, knew better than to trust him. Mitch Bacall made promises rather than threats. Additionally, he never left unfinished business. She prepared a flight under a false identity, packed a suitcase, and attempted to disappear the following morning. But he seemed to be with her everywhere she went. At the airport, a man was seated too near. She was being followed through downtown by an automobile. Outside her motel room, a shadow moved. Her paranoia was eating away at her sanity, and she hardly slept. She was scared, delirious, and fatigued by the third night. She grabbed her phone and dialed Nick. She said, "I'm not safe. He is pursuing me." When Nick heard her voice, his heart fell. He couldn't simply let her die in spite of everything. He assured her that he would protect her if she came to his house. However, Sienna realized she had made a fatal error as soon as she left her hotel room. A black SUV raced in her direction. She let out a cry as the car abruptly veered, striking her side and sending her flying to the ground. Bystanders hurried over as sirens blared in the distance, but Sienna was already fading. Before passing out, she mumbled, "Tell Nick. It was Matt all along," as her eyesight became blurry. Nick sat by her bedside at the hospital, his thoughts racing. In an attempt to comprehend everything, he again replayed her confession. Sharon showed up, fear shining in her eyes. The doctor remarked, "She's fortunate to be alive." Nick balled his fists and said, "But whoever did this wanted her dead." He was fully aware of who that was. Matt had gone too far. And now it was about survival rather than just getting even. Sienna's face was pale and her pulse was feeble. It was difficult for her to breathe. "Nick, I shouldn't have told you," she said as she eventually opened her eyes, and he firmly grasped her hand. He said, "You did the right thing." Sienna's tears, however, conveyed a different message. She said, "He won't stop. This needs to end." Matt, meantime, stared emotionlessly at the news broadcast of Sienna's accident across town. "You should have stayed loyal, Sienna," he whispered as he poured himself a drink. His reflection in the glass became more twisted and gloomy, but anger simmered beneath his composed facade. He was certain that Nick would now pursue him, and that was precisely what he desired. He saw all of this as a component of the game. Every action, every trick, every demise, all meticulously planned to hold Nick accountable for the past. However, as the hours passed, an unexpected event occurred. Sienna's health got worse. Her organs started to fail as her body rejected the drug. Despite the doctor's desperate efforts, the damage was too great. Sharon pleaded with Nick to take a nap, but he wouldn't leave her side. He sobbed and stated, "She's fighting for her life because she tried to protect us." Shaken by the news, Victoria later showed up and said, "I won't let her die alone." She cautioned, "This is what happens when you underestimate Matt Clark. He is unstoppable in addition to being dangerous." The devices all around Sienna beeped wildly as darkness fell. Shouting commands, the physicians hurried in. As he watched her flatline, Nick's world fell silent. "No, no." As the medical staff attempted to revive her, he sobbed and grasped her hand. After what seemed like hours, Sienna's heart eventually started beating again, defying all chances. Nick let out a sigh of relief and fell next to her. However, the reprieve did not last long. She had made it through the night, but her prognosis was still dire. "She might never be the same if she wakes up," the doctor muttered. Police tape encircled the crime scene back at the Bacall Club. There was evidence of foul play, but Matt had done a fantastic job of hiding his tracks. It appeared to be a horrible accident to the outside world. Nick, however, was aware of this. Even if it meant putting his own life in danger, he was determined to expose Matt once and for all. He whispered to himself, "You tried to kill her. I'm coming for you now." Days later, Sienna was haunted by flashbacks of her past while she lay in a coma. She dreamed of her time spent with Mitch, the passionate evenings that descended into manipulation, the threats that transformed into promises, and the overwhelming anxiety. "You can't hide from me even in death," Matt whispered as he stood over her hospital bed in her dream. She awoke screaming, her monitors buzzing frantically. The fear in her eyes spoke louder than the nurse's hurried attempts to comfort her. She gasped, "He's here. He's not finished." She surprised everyone by grabbing Nick's hand when he came back to her room. "You must put an end to him," she murmured in a shaky voice. Nick was struck by her urgency as she said, "If you don't, he'll destroy everyone, Sharon, Victoria, even your kids." He witnessed for the first time the extent of Mitch's power and the number of lives he had ruined. "I swear," Nick said, "I will stop him. For you." With tears running down her cheeks, Sienna gave a feeble smile. "Maybe then, I can finally rest. Her eyes fluttered shut again as her hold relaxed. She didn't answer when Nick called her name. He realized that the woman who risked all for the truth would not survive the night as the monitor's continuous beeping reverberated around the sterile room. Nick stood at the hospital window, gazing into the waning darkness as dawn broke over Genoa City. Nothing would ever be the same for him, even though the city was beginning to awaken. Match was still out there, grinning and waiting for his next move. While Sienna's life was in jeopardy, they drew the lines of war. The secret had been revealed, and another innocent soul has almost perished at the price of speaking the truth. However, Nick vowed that Sienna's pain would not be in vain this time. Nick was prepared to put a stop to the war that Mitch Bacall Matt Clark had declared. Even though Sienna's life was in danger of ending, her bravery had given Nick a light that no danger could put out. Her soul persisted unwavering and defiant, despite the gentle hum of equipment in her hospital room. She also understood, deep down in her waning consciousness, that the information she shared would transform everything. The city of Genoa would never be the same. Nick Newman's thoughts were a whirlwind of anger and terror, a restless haze that would not go away, not even for a moment. He was reminded of what Sienna had given up with each passing second in that sterile hospital room. To tell him the truth about Match, she had put her life, job, and reputation at stake. And for what purpose? To wind up connected up to machinery that kept her heart beating while she lay immobile under white sheets? Her pulse's feeble rhythm was both consoling and agonizing. When she revealed the secret to Nick, he couldn't take his eyes off of her face. Her voice was shaking as she muttered, "It's Matt, Nick," and her eyes were wide with fear. The last delusion he had held onto had been destroyed by those words. Mitch Bacall is Matt Clark. The devious transactions, the odd coincidences, and the subdued chaos that was slowly spreading throughout Genoa City all made sense now. Sienna had paid the price for exposing Matt Clark, who had returned with a new name, a new face, and a risky new game. Sharon quietly came in with 2 cups of coffee while Nick sat next to her. Worry and tiredness ringed her eyes. She put a hand on his shoulder and said, "You haven't slept." "Neither have you," Nick said, keeping his head down. The ghosts of past injuries lingered in the heavy air between them. Sharon looked at Sienna's frail body. She whispered, "She looks so peaceful. But Nick, she's battling." He nodded absently. "I sense it." He wanted to think that Sienna still had the fortitude to survive. However, he felt his stomach drop each time the monitors beeped erratically. Soon later, Victoria showed in with a businesslike demeanor, but her eyes showed the dread she was trying to conceal. She folded her arms and stated, "The police believe this was a hit and run. However, I looked at the video from outside the club. The driver was fully aware of her whereabouts." Nick's jaw clenched. "It wasn't random." "Then we know who did it," Victoria said with a sad nod. "Mitch Bacall, or whatever we are now referring to him, Matt Clark, Match, the devil himself. Choose what you want." Nick's thoughts went over every interaction he'd had with Mitch over the previous few months, including the arrogant grin, the phony charm, and the way he always seemed to be one step ahead. He had once trusted him and even thought of him as a useful business partner. Now the betrayal was burning in his chest like acid. Nick quickly stood up and declared, "He's not going to get away with this. I'm done defending myself." Sienna's honesty caused him pain. "He won't harm anyone else." Victoria let out a sigh. "You can't just go up to him, Nick. That is precisely what he desires. He's waiting for you to lose control by baiting you." With dark eyes, Nick turned to face her. "Maybe it's time for him to learn what happens when I do." Sienna stirred at that very moment. Her head turned slightly as her fingers twitched against the cover. Sharon and Nick hurried to her side. Her eyelids flickered open, revealing terrified and confused eyes. "Nick," she muttered incoherently. He leaned in closer, his heart leaping. "I am present." "You're safe now," Sienna said, her breathing increasing as her eyes raced across the room. She sobbed faintly. No, he's here." Nick tightened his grip on her hand and said, "He knows. He always knows." "He's not present." "I promise you're safe," she said, shaking her head angrily. "You're not understanding. He threatened to make me vanish if I spoke." Panic took hold of her, causing her heart monitor to jump. Nick retreated, defenseless, as nurses hurried in and gently restrained her. Sharon put a reassuring touch on his arm. Nick, she's scared. Sienna was medicated by the doctor and fell back into restless slumber. She's not just afraid of dying, she's afraid of him. Nick's resolve hardened into something dangerous when the strain subsided. Match was mistaken if he believed that they could be silenced by fear. As the late news replayed the video of Sienna's accident, Mitch Bacall, Matt Clark, sat in his leather chair in a modern penthouse with a view of the city and swirled a drink of scotch. A nasty smirk twisted his lips. He thought out loud. They always think the truth will set them free. But all it does is get them killed. A mysterious woman sat opposite him, her face hidden by shade and covered in silk. In a low, seductive voice she continued, "You're playing a dangerous game, Mitch." Mitch grinned. "Nick Newman isn't going to back down. That's the idea. Allow him to enter. I've been anticipating this rematch for a long time." Tessa's face was seen as the woman leaned forward. Even she was surprised by the revelation. Months before, she had been drawn into Mitch's circle and blackmailed with personal information. "You assured me that nobody would perish," she remarked in a shaky voice. Mitch's smile vanished. "I made no such promises." Sienna made her decision. Tessa gave him a fierce look as she realized she might be the next. She spat. "You think you're invincible, but you're not. Nick is going to kill you," Mitch said calmly but menacingly as he arose. "No one stops me. Not Nick. Not Sienna. Nobody." Nick met Detective Chance Chancellor, who was already deeply involved in the investigation, back at the hospital. "On the road where Sienna was struck, we discovered accelerant traces," Chance stated. Nick tightened his fists and said, "This wasn't an accident, it was staged to look like one." Chance nodded and said, "So it was him. Every indication points to Mitch Bacall, but he's too skilled at hiding his identity." Nick's jaw clenched. "We need proof." "I'll get it then. Whatever is necessary." Nick ignored the police tape and went back to the Bacall Club later that evening. Memories of Sienna's argument with Match filled the air inside. With his torch shining through the darkness, he moved carefully through the dimly lit pub. Then he noticed it. A partially cleaned but still noticeable bloodstain on the counter's edge. His belly contorted. He whispered to himself, "You didn't just threaten her. You hurt her right here." Determined to provide Chance with all the evidence he could discover, he snapped pictures with his phone. A door creaked open behind him as he turned to go. He froze. Who was present? Quietness. Then someone moved into the illumination. Tessa was the one. Panic filled her eyes. She quickly murmured, "Nick, you shouldn't be here." Nick squinted and said, "He's watching everything." "You're referring to Mitch." She looked over her shoulder and nodded. "He's in charge of everything, not just observing you. He has followers in every department, even the police. Before he discovers that I'm speaking to you, you must depart." Nick took hold of her arm. "You are aware of something." Tessa hesitated, caught between remorse and fear. "Tell me what he's planning." At last she muttered, "Nick, he wants to ruin your family. Sienna was only the start. He claims that he will reclaim all that you stole from him years ago, including your name, legacy, and tranquility. Everyone you care about is being targeted by him." Nick felt his blood chill. Tessa shook her head, saying, "Then we end him before he can. You don't realize that he's constantly one step ahead of you. He wants you to pursue him." A red dot appeared on Tessa's chest before Nick could reply. "It's part of his plan." Her horrified eyes grew wide. "No," she exclaimed. Just as a bullet broke a mirror behind them, Nick leaped forward and pulled her down. Another shot rang out, and they scrambled behind the bar. Nick grabbed his phone and dialed Chance. "We're being attacked at the club," he yelled. Police sirens could be heard outside in a matter of minutes. However, the gunman had disappeared into the darkness by the time they came out. Tessa's face was pale and she was shaking. She said, "He'll kill me for this." Nick gave her a stern look. He took her back to the hospital and put her under police protection, saying, "Not if I get to him first." Sharon was taken aback when she saw her. "Tessa, with him, what are you doing?" Tessa's voice broke. "Making an effort to live." Mitch, meanwhile, observed the whole thing on his security monitors in his penthouse. "You let me down, Tessa," he whispered. He looked to his goon. The man nodded and walked away without saying anything. "Make sure she doesn't live to regret her betrayal." Mitch looked back at the screen that displayed Sienna's hospital room. With a terrifying smile he remarked, "And as for you, my dear Sienna, you can rest easy for now." Days went by. Sienna continued to exist in a precarious state, intermittently losing consciousness. Nick found it difficult to piece together the names, dates, and snippets of warnings she whispered every time she woke up. One evening, she opened her eyes once more and made a feeble grab for him. She said, "There's a file." Nick leaned down and said, "His real plan. It's hidden. At the club. Behind the portrait." "Which portrait?" "One of us," she said, her eyes welling with tears. "He declared it to be our masterpiece."